I'll just start with a little bit of a recap of what we went through on Wednesday regarding the password. So on Wednesday, what we talked about is obviously we don't store a password in plain text, right? And the way that we store them is through hashing them. But if you just store the password in a hash, then an attacker can just compare what they call a rainbow hash or a hash table of pre-computed hash values of very common passwords and find matches of it. To combat that, we add something called salt, which you append just some random string at the end of the password, so that when an attacker wants to guess password, they would have to add a salt for each password to guess first. And if you're brute forcing this, you will do a bunch of different guesses, and that slows down the attacker quite a bit. Then we add one more defense, which is called a pepper, salt and pepper. And the pepper is not stored in a database. The pepper is just a site-wide static string that you use. It's not public, right? But every time that you encrypt it, or you don't encrypt it, every time you hash it before you compare it, you take an additional hash of the pepper, then you add an additional layer of complexity to it that the attacker has to go through first before they can compare the passwords. So last lecture, I talked about a file called rocky.txt. Not sure if you guys can see this. Am I sharing the screen? Can you see this text document? Yeah, okay, good. So this document is just a compiled list of very, very common password. I'm not sure if it's been updated, but this has been around for years. And I highly encourage you to go through and see if you can find your password in here. There's some very common ones like Curdy, right? Curdy, a bunch of different numbers are in here. Curdy, if you don't know, it's just the first 6 characters on your keyboard. If you start with Q, is the most common password. So if you use a somewhat common password, I would definitely go for this list and see if it's on here. If it's on here, then change it. Yeah. Okay. So password inputs. When we talked about passwords last class, obviously this class we're going to talk about how different methods of compromising password might happen. And first and foremost, SQL injection attacks are the most popular way to attack a website, and it's through passwords. Well, it's through input boxes, but most likely they're using password boxes, right? So the idea here is if you have a login site, right? I want to log into Google, I have to put in my username and my password. But if I want to log into somebody else's account, right, I need to know their passwords. But if I don't know the password, what I can do is I can use SQL injection attack to bypass their security. So again, one of the most dangerous form of attack, because you don't actually need to know how their server works, right? If they're using an SQL server, this is going to, you can attack it with this form of attack. You don't necessarily need to know if their site is written in Python or PHP whatsoever. You can still do it. So for 2015, more than 51% of cyber attacks on webs are from SQL injection attacks. This is one of the first things that I try when I white box attack website. When friends, bring me the website and they go, "Hey, can you check this for security issues?" I usually start with SQL attacks before I actually look at the code, because looking at the code, right, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, but SQL attack is the first thing that most people will try. So what it is user inputs some code, an actual SQL code into your input form. So where your password is, instead of entering a password, they will input actual SQL code into it. And your server, when it reads this code, doesn't know that it's not supposed to be there, right? It just sees it, it's code, and it runs it. And these are some of the damages that can be done, right? Unauthorized login, you obviously don't want other people to be able to log into accounts that don't belong to them. Unauthorized changes to the table, which is where you get to modify them, right? Or even drop table, so you can completely delete the table. So changes to table, maybe you run a bank account. If I change my bank account to $1 million, well, yeah, you don't want that to happen. This is what it kind of looks like. So a little bit of code, you take in the user's input, and then you have a bit more code. So when the user inputs code, where they here is take user input directly, then your server would actually take that code and run it. So here's an example. So tautology is where something is always true, right? So 1 equals 1 obviously is true at all times. So if I input the password as 1 or 1 equals 1, then what you have in code is basically check if password equals to 1 or 1 equals to 1. Of course, 1 equals to 1 is true. So then the server allows you to log in, right? And another way to use it is through comment mark, which this 2- here is the comment mark for SQL. When you do 2- at the end of your password inputs, subsequent code are basically ignored. So usually right after where you input the user password, you check for validity, right? You check if they're right before they can log in. Here's an example of what it looks like. Let's see here. Okay, so here all I have is just some sample database that is on W3 Schools, which is a very good Python SQL kind of introductory site. And you can play around with it if you want to. So if I just run SQL here, right, I get a bunch of entries. I get a bunch of entries here, but I've commented out where city equals to Berlin, right? So if I leave this in here, now I get a completely different input. So you can imagine where if I put in an answer, right? Or sorry, if I put in my password and then I add 2 dashes behind it to ignore if where city equals to Berlin is your password check, right? Where password equals to your password hash, and I run it, I get a completely different result. So with this, I can bypass login requirements. Of course, if I talk about this, right, I'm not going to talk about. I don't want you to do this in just for fun, right? Don't attack people don't attack stuff that doesn't belong to you, because it is a criminal offense. But I'm letting you know like what could potentially exist in the real world, and then on the next slides, I will show you how to defend against it. And for SQL injection, it is also really important that you do actually ensure that each of your site that you implement is secure against it. So piggyback queries is basically where I put in more code behind it, right? But this one is server code. So for example, I can do drop table, right? I do semicolon to end the line, and then I add drop table. Now, the next thing that your code is going to do when it reads this, right? It takes in user password, okay, end line, and the next command is drop table. So your code is going to take this and just drop the table. Okay, so another thing that they might do is drop table users and then do comment out. And if you have security check behind this, right, if you have your string input to make sure that is valid or not, then you can comment out the check, and your server once again just takes this code and run it. So here's a SKCD. If you don't know, this is a very common or very popular webcomics for computer science related stuff. And what it says here is basically a mom picking up a phone. The school is calling her about some computer trouble. Well, is my son in trouble? Did he break something? In a way, yeah. Did you really name your son Robert, drop table students? Oh, yes, little Bobby Tables, we call him, right? And so what happened in this comics is the administrator basically took the student's name and just ran it as a command and lost the entire student record for the year. Right, and which this goes well with my next slides. So good lesson for you to learn how to sanitize your data. So data sanitization is the most important thing that you can do against SQL injection attack. And what that basically is, you need to know that all inputs are evil. Where you have communications in computers, there is some vulnerability that can be exploited. Oh, I got some questions. Give me 1 second. Okay, that's just before. Sorry, if I'm missing some questions, can somebody let me know, because it doesn't actually pop up my window. Okay, so sanitized input is a function provided by PHP. Python will have equivalents of this, right? And what it does is it automatically strips out any of these quote unquote dangerous characters for you. So any comment marks, quotations, it will strip it out for you before you run the command. So another thing you can do is make sure that the input conforms to expected input, right? If you run a site and you expect all your usernames to be either emails or users, right, valid characters, then you might limit it, right? You might limit the input box to only accept characters and numbers, @ symbol maybe, and that's it. Parameterized inputs. this is where we use something called prepare statements, right? So what they do is they're placeholders for parameters and values that are supplied at execution time, which is the user inputs. So what it does is it tells the program to take these as plain text, right, and don't run anything in it that resembles code. And then another thing you can try is pre-attack your system. So again, this is where you have somebody else, right, that's the good guy, attack your system and make sure that there is no easy security issues with your site. And you want somebody who's a white hat hacker to attack you first, because if they can find the exploit, you can fix it before a black hat hacker can attack you and then actually steal some monetary value out of your site. So SQL is really important to defend against because it's one of the first things that people tried, right? So it's common, and also the damage is actually pretty big. If you are running a website for some big company, you will 100% get fired if your site is attacked under SQL injection attack. If you are working for the government, well, you might be in a bit more of trouble, right? If you work for the military, there's a good chance that you'll get charged with espionage. So make sure that you do actually clean up input and parameterize your statements correctly. And here are some other things that you might encounter when you get to the real world. So blue team versus red team is one of the newer things that they're trying. This is coming from originally, I think Halo had blue team versus red team as a very popular online game, right? So you have red team as the adversary who's trying to break into your system, and you have blue team who's trying to defend the system. Usually in an office setting, right, you will take your team of developers and you split them into blue team and red team. And one of them basically is trying to break the system while the blue team is trying to secure it. And this goes just past security, right? Blue team, red team can be applied to ensuring that the program is bug-free, right? Doesn't cause any issues, right? Edge cases. Okay, penetration testers. These are people who they're essentially a consulting firm or company. And what they do is they identify weakness in a system for a particular client, right? These could be people disguised at IT support and see if an employee of your company will fall for it. So what often happens is, I'll give you an example. One of my friends actually worked as a penetration tester once he graduated from college. And what he does is he works for this company, right? And his company would get contracts with other big name companies, or could just be like small companies. And the example that he gave me was this bank. It's a small town bank in kind of in the middle of Narnia, just nowhere. And what he does is he actually, more than just online securing their site and making sure that it's secure by attacking it, right, to make sure that there's no exploits, he will actually go in person. And one of the examples that he gave me was he went on location to the bank. This is before COVID. He basically dressed up as an IT guy, right? He just walked up to the person at the desk and just said, "Hey, I got a call from one of your bosses earlier telling me to go look at something in the back." And he basically just walked in, right? He just walked into the bank, walked into the back, plugged in his computer to the port, and just started reading stuff. That's bad, right? That's really bad. So by the time that they he was able to do this for a while, maybe like 10 minutes before somebody came and talked to him. But hey, do you have any like credentials? Like, can you show me like where you're from, right? And outside there's a cop car waiting for him, but he just has this little business card almost kind of thing that he shows that he's part of the consulting company who's pen testing your system. And yeah, that was pretty close to getting arrested. So penetration testers are basically good guys who help you ensure that your system is secure by pre-attacking it and letting you know if there's any weaknesses in it. Ethical hackers, a little similar to penetration testers, except they're not exactly, I wouldn't say specialized in doing it. Their goal is more so of they find something, they let people know. So this is mostly academia people who, for example, finds a flaw in Google's accounts and they will publish a paper about it and Google can fix it. Well, they let Google know first and then they publish a paper if Google refuses to fix it or if they fixed it. Next, we're going to talk about message encryption. And with message encryption, we're mostly concerned about the confidentiality of our messages. So ideally, we don't want a third party listening to our conversation when it's just you and me chatting over the phone, right? And here's an example I'm going to give you is Wireshark, which is just an application where you can sniff packets, is what they call it, which is basically just taking random packets in the air, right? If you sit in a cafe, I can just sniff these packets in the air and read the contents of them. So here's an example of Wireshark. I just created a very bad website that sends your password over some form in plain text, right? Over the internet when you log in. So when you log in and I'm, for example, some other computer sitting in a cafe, I can sniff these packets and I can read the content of them. And here it just straight up tells me what the username and password is. And obviously it's not a very secure password now because somebody has just read it. This is one of the reasons why you don't actually want to log into bank accounts and do anything security related when you are on public Wi-Fi, because anyone that is in range can actually just sit here, open their computer and just start reading the messages that you're sent across the internet. So communications between Alice and Bob, right? We gave this example at the beginning of class last lecture where we talked about an messaging application where Alice wants to message Bob. They just meet for Friday night dinner, or here we have coffee at 7, right? And you have some other party, Eve, who's an eavesdropper, wants to listen to this conversation and maybe piggyback, right? The annoying third friend. So how do we exactly prevent Eve from getting this message? Well, encryption is probably our best way you can do this, right? So what it is really, we start with some plain text, right? So this is, let's meet tomorrow at 7. You encrypt it into some gibberish, basically, and then you want to decrypt it, which takes that gibberish and returns it back into the same message for Bob. So encryption at the start of the very first start required is basically a rotation, right? So you take each character and you maybe rotate it 2 characters down. So if it's A, I convert the character to C. And if I do this for every character in the string, then I end up with a completely different string, right? But it's still a one-to-one mapping. And I can go back, if I pass this message to somebody else over the room, right? Anyone else who intercepts it, who doesn't know that key, won't be able to get the original message. But if my friend across the room knows that the password is 2, right, then they can just reverse. And if the character is a C, then they map it back to an A and get the original string back. Now, the problem is that's not very secure, right? Because as an attacker, all you have to do is just try all 26 or however many ASCII code value that you have to try. And what we use today is actually based on mathematics. Encryption algorithms are not really designed by computer security personnel, so not really designed by computer engineers or scientists. They're actually designed by mathematicians. And we use what is called a Feistel network, which basically is a series, right? It's just round n series of substitution and transposition. Substitution is where we just take a character and replace it with another one, right? And it's always the same, right? You take X, you always replace it with Y. Transposition is where you just swap some bits around. Again, like this is very specific because we need to be able to go back and recover our original message. So a little bit of disclaimer first here. I'm going to talk about some algorithms. One of the most important things that you want to know is you never want to implement your own encryption algorithm, right? Because if you do it, you will most likely do it wrong, A. And B, you will leave behind some security flaws that attackers can exploit. So what you want to do is use existing ones, right? As OpenSSL is a pretty good library that has a bunch of different encryption schemes that you can use. You can check other supported libraries. I'm sure pretty sure all programming languages would have some support for encryption. So when we talk about encryption, we mostly have symmetric versus asymmetric. Does anybody know what the difference between the two is?
Is it that One of them encrypts both ways, whereas the other one only encrypts going one way.
Could you go a little bit more in detail? You're almost there.
So
it's on the right track.
I want to say that one of them uses a public key to encrypt data when you're sending it. I can't remember the specifics, but I just remember something.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, you're on the right track. There is definitely a public key and private key involved. Okay, Mr. Strasser?
I was just going to say that the symmetric encryption would use a private key to encrypt and decrypt, and then the asymmetric would use the public key.
Okay, so we're on the right track, but we're not quite there yet. Almost. Okay, so what symmetric is, we have only one key. So that's the symmetric part of it, right? There's only one symmetric key that is used by both Alice and Bob. Asymmetric has a private and a public key. Okay, so symmetric encryption uses the same key to encrypt and decrypt. Here's some example: DES, free DES, and AES. So DES is probably pretty old by now. It's not very secure. You can break it within like a couple seconds. Triple DES is where you try to improve the security of DES by running DES 3 times. AES is the current industrial standard for symmetric encryptions. Okay, so asymmetric uses 2 different keys, right? So that's the asymmetric part of it. So you have private key and then your public key. Now, what you do is if you encrypted a message with your private key, it means that only the public key can decrypt it. And vice versa, if you encrypt it with your public key, only the private key can decrypt your message. And when you, as a user, right, you want to keep your private key private, and the public key you can really just give it to anyone. So, what is the point of this, right? If you give your key to everyone, what is the point of encrypting it with your private key before somebody else can read it with your public key? Does anybody want to take a guess?
You can send people encrypted messages that only they can decrypt.
Yes, the message is encrypted, but if your public key is public, right? So anyone can get your public key.
Is it that they know it's coming from you because you're the only one who has that private key?
Yes, very good, very good. I think you're the first person who got gotten it every year that I've asked this. You're the only one, right? It has to come from you because you're the only one with that private key. So if I get a message from Bob and I decrypt it with his public key, Bob is the only one who can send it unless his private key has been compromised. So this is the reason why you don't want to give your private keys to strangers, right? You don't want your private key compromised because they can then pretend to be you and send messages. The current industrial standard that we use is called RSA for asymmetric encryption. And again, I don't expect you to know these down to the details. I want you to, if you need to use encryption in the future, right, come back to these slides or maybe look it up online, what you need to use. So here's an example of AES, right? This is the symmetric encryption. And what we have here is 2 keys that are identical. Alex takes this plain text. She encrypts it with the key. Out comes the ciphertext, again, gibberish, and you send this over the internet. Bob takes this message, right? He takes a key, it's the same key, and then decrypts it back to the original message. Now, the problem with this approach is you need some way that you can do first to both share the key, right? So maybe you meet in person and you share this key first, or if you're doing this over online, you need some other protocol. I think one of them is Diffie-Hellman key exchange is probably the most popular one that's being used. So when we talk about asymmetric encryption, this is where you have RSA, right? So 2 different keys. If you want to send a message to Bob, you take Bob's public key to encrypt the message, and then Bob will decrypt it with his private key. So whoever is receiving the message, you want to take their public key to encrypt, and you decrypt. Obviously, they decrypt with their own private key. So outcome to syntax, again, this is exactly the same as symmetric encryption, except you use 2 different keys. So which seam should you use, right? Because we have AES and RSA, they both have their own advantages. You generally want to use, again, these are the industrial standards. So 3DES is not very secure anymore. These are the ones that you want to use. Here's some other related concepts. Again, these are links if you want to click on it. So HTTPS is basically where HTTP is just sending messages over the internet by themselves without any security on it. When you add that S in it, that adds an additional transport layer security, which is encryption over your client and the web server. In your web page, right? So if I go over to Google, so here you can see that I have a connection to W Free Schools, right? So I have this S here. This means that there's going to be a secure connection between us, between my web client and W Free Schools. This is one thing that you should probably check, right? Before you input your logins to a bank account, right? If they don't have a secure protocol, if you're inputting it in a cafe that anyone else can sniff your passwords, you can have this issue where I had showed you earlier with Wireshark, right? You can just read whatever people are sending over the internet if you don't have HTTPS. So S encrypts whatever you're sending over here. No S leaves it just in plain text. So let me see. So csc.msu.edu for a while, I think they fixed it by now. Yeah, they fixed it by now. So for a couple of years, they actually had this on HTTP for a while, and we were trying to tell whoever the system admin were to change it, and it took a while for them to actually fix this. Okay, so let's see. Diffie-Hellman key exchange, this is where I talked about earlier. It's just some protocol that you can exchange keys without a third party listening to. So often asymmetric encryption is slower than symmetric, but they are more secure. So what you want to do is usually you exchange the shared key of symmetric encryption using asymmetric. So the first message that you sent with asymmetric is basically just the key that you want to use for symmetric communication, which then you just use symmetric encryption for the rest of the conversation. Any questions so far? Two in chat. Something interesting about that is my website for my team is still on HTTP and not HTTPS. Yeah, so that's something that you can actually fix. I don't remember how to do it, but if you Google it, it's not hard. I'm pretty sure it's just one little setting, like a config file that you turn on, and that's it. MSU web devs are lacking. Yeah, the new student portal was not very good. I must admit, I was having quite a bit of trouble trying to find classes for it too. But the CSE one is actually hosted by us, so that was somebody in our department that had to change it. But that's fixed now, so we're good. Okay, so that about concludes my main topics in security for computer science. I have a couple more that I added at the end here because we have more time. But the key takeaway is you need to consider security as an important part of your system, right? It's part of your system that you need to consider when you're designing it. So during your requirement specs, you should have considered some of these requirements, right? Don't wait until you've been compromised. You don't want somebody to have attacked you, stole money already before you start building a gate around it, right? So stay vigilant, look out for possible attacks. And this applies to, again, not just your system, right? You check your emails. Yesterday, I got a message from Facebook on my MSU email and telling me that, hey, do you want to log in easier? Well, I don't even have a Facebook with my MSU email, and I don't even use my Facebook to begin with. So, all right, if you know about that, just be careful. Don't click on any links that they've sent you. Expect the unexpected. Well, edge cases are usually the vulnerabilities of our system. So you need to cover those. Most of the time you would design your system, right, about like for the general public where the majority of users are expected to do X, right? It's fine, totally valid, right? Doesn't make sense to make your system specialized to some 1% user, right? So, but you do need to consider those edge cases that you end up putting if you consider only the majority of users, right? Now, how to store your password. Again, this is very important. I want you to know this by heart, right? Don't store it in plain text, salt and pepper. Why do we need to use salt and pepper? That's probably something that I want you to know too. Okay, so inputs are evil, right? Anywhere that your user can put in something, you can you need to try to input sanitize it, try input sanitization, right? You need to make sure that they're really typing what you expect them to. I want you to know what SQL attacks are and how to prevent them. This is important. Again, you can get in legal trouble if you write software that is attackable, that can be attacked. Encrypting, right? Public key, private key, what standard you want to use. Again, I don't expect you to know exactly how AES and RSA works down to the detail, but I do want you to know which one is symmetric and which one is asymmetric. Okay, so I would chat here. Never click on an email link in general unless you specify the request. Yep. Yes, that is very true. Don't click on any email links unless you're required to. Right. Last class I mentioned how email links, they can redirect it to any link that they wanted to, right? So a button that says login, it doesn't necessarily have to point to the site that you expect it to. So if you need to change password, always just type in wherever site that you need to change it to, Netflix, Google, go to their actual website, request a password change, and then change it from there. I've seen some creative ones at my job recently. Some have been cleverly masked as the CEO. You can't trust emails on anyone. Yeah. So in computer security, computer science, where you have communications, there is a vulnerability. So where you can communicate, somebody can send you an email, there's going to be vulnerability. Okay. So again, I want you to know AES and RSA are the current standards. Come back and look at them if you need to. Don't implement your own encryption algorithms. Use existing ones. Okay, so with that, anyone have any questions? Quickly talk about these actually before we move on to automotive security. So here's a couple of things that I just added that we can quickly talk about that you will see in the future, probably, definitely, actually. So drive-by downloads is where you have, you expect to download something from a website, right? And an attacker replaces that link or that file with another file, a virus. And if you click on it, then you download something else that you didn't intend. Man in the middle usually starts by compromising your system through this drive-by download. What they do is basically insert this man in the middle. So if you think about Alice and Bob, right? If I add an additional person here, I can't draw, so bear with me here. So man in the middle, and what they usually do is they can masquerade. So if I'm using asymmetric encryption, we have public and private key, right? So if I do symmetric encryption where you have the same key, if I am the man in the middle, what I can do is I can intercept your first communication where you share the key, right? And I take the key of Alice and I take your key, and then I actually just send Bob a completely different key, right? So if I send Bob key B, you would never actually know about this, right? If you're Alice and Bob, you would never know about this. But this man in the middle now has access to every single message that you sent, right? Because everything goes through, if they're intercepting your message, everything goes through them. They decrypt it with Alex's key, read the message, and they can modify if they want to, and then they send it encrypted with Bob's key. So this is basically the foundation of man in the middle attack, where you have somebody in the middle intercepting your messages. They're either just listening in on it, or they can change things about it. So the best way that you can actually defend against, and this is just personal opinion, against these possible attacks is actually through an ad blocker, because I don't know if you guys have download things often, but if you are on, if you're downloading, say, scripts for different kinds of things, sometimes the authors will want to monetize them by sending you through like a bit.ly link, right? bit.ly, which is just basically a website full of ads, but they give you a download link at the top. And sometimes some of these websites will actually cover their download link with another download image button that will basically hijack your click and make you download something else first. And what you can do is this ad blocker basically deletes everything that you don't want to see and leaves just important content. Gona Cody said, I suppose that raises a question. how can we make email trustable? Well, you can't, right? You can't really make emails trustable. So there's you could probably I'm sure there's ways to actually sign emails because you can use public key and private key too. But I haven't actually looked into that, so that might be something that is worth investigating. Twitch hates ad blockers. Yes, that's true. But actually, there's a new one that works for Twitch right now until they break it again. So ad blockers, if you don't have one, definitely recommend you to install one. This is one that I use, uBlock Origin, I think. Is it uBlock Origin? I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, uBlock Origin, and it just basically blocks out any ad that you would see. So okay, so additional information. I'm going to probably post a more detailed version slide from last year. I talked about some of the stuff that might not be on here. For example, that man-in-the-middle attack, I think I covered. I covered some of the foundation of, I guess, some of the first attacks that we've seen, such as like worms, viruses, and yeah. And I think I also talked about different types of attackers there. Okay, so does anyone have any questions? It doesn't even have to relate to just this lecture. If you have any just generic questions, if you want to ask, I'm more than happy to see if I can answer them. In the past year, I have some student actually asked me what HTTPS is, because there was apparently a misconception where if they have HTTPS, that implies that they're storing the password securely, which is not true at all, right? So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I can try to answer them, right? So Cody said that in my work, we received email from a virtual box due to government contracts. Yeah, each email is then forwarded to main account to a dummy email service and open a unique and secure container. This means that even if an email contains scripts, all they get is a virtual system that has absolutely no identifying information, which will die shortly after. Yeah, so this is kind of an overkill, right? So you wouldn't really do this for your own personal email, most likely, but for a government job, you would probably, that does make sense, right? Especially if you're working with critical information, you don't want some email script to just be able to reach entire system. So you open it in basically a virtual machine, read the email, and then if you get attacked, it's just a VM, right? It's just a VMware, who cares? You just kill it and make a new one. So with that, I'm going to start the next bit of lecture. It's very short. And this connects to what we were talking about in class, right? We're mostly focused on automotive cybersecurity. Perhaps I should just start with this. This is a video that Dr. Chen shows. Oh, here's another pretty fun website that you can, I guess, check out if you want to, haveibeenpwned.com. You basically can check if your email has been compromised before on some big sites. Yeah. Check it out, pretty fun. This is a video that Dr. Chen shows in class. Okay, so we checked this earlier, so the audio should work. Let me know if it does or if it doesn't.
It's not fun to have your 2-ton SUV's brakes hacked just as you're parking in front of a ditch.
Okay, hold on tight. Hold on. Oh.
That's what I've learned from Charlie Miller and Chris Valasek, a pair of hackers who have spent the last year developing a piece of software that can wirelessly sabotage this 2014 Jeep Cherokee. It hasn't been altered in any way. There are no devices attached to it. But like many thousands of Jeeps around the world, it can be remotely hacked over the internet through a cellular connection to its entertainment system that would allow someone to take over its steering, its transmission, and even its brakes. To demonstrate that, I'm going to act as today's crash test dummy and drive it on the highway here in St. Louis, while Charlie and Chris hijack its digital systems from Charlie's house miles away. They wouldn't tell me what they had planned, but they assured me that it wouldn't be anything life-threatening.
Remember, Andy, no matter what happens, don't panic.
It's not the first time I've driven a car while it's being attacked by these two hackers. But in 2013, they were in the back seat, and their laptops were wired into the vehicle through a port in its dashboard. Now they're sending the same sort of attacks remotely, and I have no idea what they might do.
He's going as fast as I've seen him, so.
So first we're going to turn the fan on him.
Yeah, let's turn the fan on, see if he even notices.
All right, something just turned on, all the fans and AC and stuff. I didn't do that. The trick started small. Oh my God. There's a picture of Charlie and Chris in tracksuits that just appeared on the dashboard. But as I drove down the interstate, things started getting unpleasant and very loud. Perfect. I can't turn it down.
This was such a fun video. Steve, okay,
Cool.
enjoyed
Okay, now the air conditioning is blasting, the music is blasting, and I can't see anything because of the windshield wiper fluid.
Okay, do it. Do it. Kill the engine.
So we're killing the engine right now.
It says park sense. Actually can't accelerate. I stomped on the gas, but the Jeep slowed to a crawl. It says 43 miles an hour, but I'm not going that fast. I turned on my hazard lights, but I was still stuck in the right lane with no shoulder to escape onto. Guys, I'm stuck on the highway.
What are you saying?
I don't know, I think he's panicking. He's not gonna be able to hear us with that radio. It's so loud.
Guys, I need the accelerator to work again.
The accelerator will work.
It won't work!
You're doomed.
Seriously, it's dangerous. I need to move.
You gotta turn the car off!
Okay.
Now you should be good to go. Semi drove by.
All right, I'm gonna pull over because I have PTSD. Charlie and Chris have only tested the full range of their attacks on a Jeep Cherokee. But they say that hundreds of thousands of late model Chrysler vehicles may be vulnerable through a feature called Uconnect, an internet-connected computer in the dashboard known as its head unit.
These cars, head units, expose a particular service that probably they didn't want to. It lets you do things like query it for information like the GPS or the VIN or all sorts of other things, but it also lets you just run commands.
So you have to first break into the car remotely over the cell network and then move laterally if you want to do things like send CAN messages. And those are the messages that we can use to control things like steering or the windshield wipers or braking.
They plan to release a portion of their exploit code at the annual Black Hat Hacker Conference next month. They've also alerted Chrysler, which is issuing a security patch. But they say a lot more needs to be done to protect a new generation of cars that are increasingly connected to the internet and potentially hackable. You guys basically brought this car to a standstill while I was driving on the highway, which I may never forgive you for. And that was just like an experiment. What do you think is the worst case scenario?
We wanted to point out, to show that this attack has serious consequences for this vehicle. And so we did, attack you. But we did it in as safe a way as we could, so we didn't want you to get hurt, obviously. That's why we're working, is to make sure that we figure out vulnerabilities, weaknesses, get them fixed.
We're only two guys with one car, right? So, we can't look at every car, and we want to release this information because more people like us need to be focused on this problem.
After their stunt on the highway, Chris and Charlie still wanted to show me a couple of other tricks. Below a certain speed, they can control the Jeep steering as long as it's in reverse, pop its locks, mess with the speedometer, and, of course, disable the brakes. Okay, hold on tight. Hold on. Oh,
He's not getting out of that.
I don't think so.
We're going to be doing some pushing.
Yeah, I know what I'm saying. That's how you drive in the Midwest. New Yorkers don't know how to do that.
So hopefully that gives you an example. This is in 2015, so it's actually decently recent.
Let's press play.
See. So it's decently recent. By now, maybe you would consider again if you're going to buy a Tesla, right? Because Tesla fully automated. If you get attacked with an attack like this, you're stuck in a highway. Anyone actually have a car that has these telemetrics in it? You're worried now? Yeah, Jason says his car has Uconnect. Yeah, well, my car also has some connection, but I did actually disable it. So, and this kind of ties into where we were talking about earlier, where you have communications. There's a vulnerability that you can exploit. So this Uconnect thing actually connects to the internet. Similar connection surfaces across different brands of cars will also do the same thing, where they connect to the internet, and that actually is a link that an attacker can use to compromise the system. So it's becoming more and more autonomous for our vehicles, but at the same time, we're not really securing it as well as we should be doing. Right, for a vehicle in particular, we're really designing them for safety, functionality more than security. The automotive industry is actually very competitive, right? You need to let your car out as fast as possible, as much features designed for the user. But at the same time, right, we were not really considering security as part of it. If you add like some little one little feature for the car, right, that can improve security, but if it costs a lot of money, then it might not sell compared to a car that doesn't have it for a different OEM. So you are potentially competing with other OEMs to release cars, but you need to also implement your own safety, right? Implementation is pretty hard. You can't really encrypt stuff on the car because you are real-time dependent, right? So if you're encrypting and decrypting it on the fly, then you might not receive that information within reasonable time, and maybe that car has passed you by now that you have decrypted the package. So again, it impedes implementation of current implementations. So SSH secure shell strategies. Whereas the big thing here is there's not actual attack yet, right? Other than the ones that you've seen by white box hacker, there's not actually a black hat attack where damage was done or like people were killed. So it's not exactly widely understood or recognized by the automotive industry. They're getting a bit better with it now. The software lacks efficient logging or surveillance, right? So your computer, you have a bunch of logging that happens in the back. You might not even know about it. And if you've been attacked, somebody can, system admin, right, can go back and look at it and maybe trace where it came from. The car, we don't have any kind of logging. We don't have any kind of storage really. So you don't really have that capability to track who's attacking you. For research, it's still emerging. There isn't really that much research with respect to automotive security. I think obviously right now the big thing is machine learning has a lot of attentions. So yeah, question in the chat, maybe comments. I did a hackathon challenge with some Chevy vehicle before, same issues. The idea of having infotainment system even have access that to the CAN bus can be a flaw. Now the flaw is the injection by ODB. Yep, I'll cover these later. Some mechanics and uses to make people vehicles appear or realistically have issues, inject code or sell the rights to vehicle to a third party. Yeah. So standardization, of course, a lot of this will require standardization across OEMs and tier one suppliers, which are basically like Bose and companies that provide parts for the OEM. OEMs would be your Ford, Jeep, and so on. So it obviously requires a lot of collaboration between a lot of competitors. They need to find the time to get together, agree on a standard that they can use. Sure. So yeah, threat surfaces. So this is where on your car, these are possible ways that you can be attacked, right? Telemetric units, that's your infotainment system usually. You might have even just a dashboard that you can click for music, right? My car, I can use it. There's like a little touch screen that you can use to change music and so on. That by itself is a potential issue because I can plug my phone into a port and I can control that with it, right? That communication channel, I can potentially attack it with that. Bluetooth network, most car by now today is that if you buy a car, probably has Bluetooth in it. But then again, this Bluetooth connection is a way that you can talk to the car. Attackers can use the same connection to attack your car. The only good thing about the Bluetooth is the range is actually not as big as you expect it to be. So if you're driving on a highway, they would basically have to be tailing you to use a Bluetooth attack on you. With telemetric units, because you connect it to some 3G network, you don't have to be right behind the guy, right? So ECUs are basically different microcomputers on your car that they're separate computing units. But if you compromise one of them, right, if you flash some malicious code onto it, that ECU can actually do quite a bit of damage. Tire pressure monitor system in your vehicle on the tires. There's this monitor system that will check if it's on low tire pressure, right? And your dashboard lights up when one of your tires are obviously low pressure. But what we found out is if you actually just compromise one of these tire pressure monitor sensors and have them send a bunch of random messages to the car through this CAN bus, we can launch a denial of service attack. Right? We talked about this last lecture, where you just basically spam some computer or some server with a bunch of packets until they can't respond. They can't talk to legitimate clients. And we have the same concept here, where we just flood the CAN bus so that there's no legitimate communication that can go across it. This CAN bus is basically a giant bus that runs across the entire car, and any communication between, for example, your tail light, your head unit, your computer, your communication device with the internet, they all go through this CAN bus. Your ODB port is something that I believe is it Cody? Yeah, Cody mentioned. That's a port that maintenance for vehicles mechanics can plug into to get information about the car. But that port is also a huge issue for us right now because, so like Cody mentioned, the mechanics can actually plug it in, right, and then modify the car directly, have it show messages that is not true, right? You have to show that you need to get your oil replaced, but when your oil doesn't actually need to get replaced to get more business out of it, right? If you're an attacker, you can actually inject malicious firmware onto your vehicle through this OBD port. The key thing about ODB port, why it's not as big of an issue right now, is because this is considered a physical attack. So for a malicious adversary to attack your system through this port, they have to have an actual connection to your vehicle, and they have to have this access to this port to begin with, right? So it's not like you can just walk up to any car parked in the parking lot and then attack their port like this, right? You have to actually have access to it. So most of the time it's actually mechanics that can probably attack your car with this. So any questions regarding automotive cybersecurity? Again, this is just a very, very brief introduction to it.